Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. Before I do start this video, I do want to apologize for the lack of audio on the initial cast of this when I uploaded it. I'm trying this with a different file type now to see if I don't have any issues. I don't know if it's something up on YouTube's end. I don't know if it's something I messed up on my end. Might have changed some settings or something. Regardless, hopefully this is working out and there will be no problems this time around. So, what I decided to do here, this matchup is Dark Elves against the Greenskins. We are playing on the River Amazon. For my lord, I did decide to bring the good old Baconator. So, Wartsag, and of course he does have here we go, Fists of Gork, the war paint of Wartsag, Squealy Beast, Bonewood Staff, Effigy the Git, of course, and Get Back here. Very useful spell if you need to sort of keep your troops in line and rally whatever might be falling apart. You find that it's often actually pretty useful. So I know some people are not fond of Here We Go and Fists of Gork. However, in my experience, it's good to have both. It gives you some extra sort of ability to get off your Bonewood Staff. It means you can cover more parts of the front with these sort of melee attack buffs. And if there was one little error I'd say I made here was the fact that I chose not to bring Brain Burster. Now for the rest of the composition here, front line of Savage Orc Big Guns, and this time around, rather than going for an armor-piercing bunch of units like, say, Black Orcs to deal with enemy Horganth Executioners or Blackguard, I decided to go with Doomdiver Catapults, figuring that if my opponent goes armor-heavy, I will have a very solid artillery presence to shut them down. My front line is backed by the AP Cloonies as well as the Warlord's Boys to provide some armor sundering, and honestly, Savage Orc Big Guns are an excellent unit against the Dark Elves. These guys can basically destroy anything except for Blackguard and Executioners, so just really solid overall. They'll destroy the Dark Elf monsters, they'll destroy the Dark Elf cavalry. Just an excellent unit, and definitely would recommend them in this matchup. Even if you go with heavy Black Orc presence, often good to mix in at least a handful of Savage Orc Big Guns, just to get that extra anti-large bonus and that extra melee attack. Behind that, we do have 3 Nasty Skulkers providing some peripheral presence and protection for these Doomdiver Catapults, as well as a small skirmishing corps of Death Creepers and Mogrov's Mangy Marauders. Now, as you can see, we are immediately pecking away at my opponent's build, but unfortunately for me, my opponent here did decide to go with something a little bit unconventional, and a bit of an interesting comp here, a very non-elite infantry force. You can see, headed by Marathi on foot. She also has some pretty odd spell choices, if you ask me. If we look at her real quick, we can see Enchanting Beauty, of course, Heartrender and Dark Sword, and she does have Doom and Darkness, Pit of Shades, Soul Blight, and Power of Darkness. Shockingly enough, there is no Soul Stealer, which I feel is a staple of most of Marathi's builds. Regardless, though, she's still a very decent melee combatant, and what my opponent seems to be going for here is trying to achieve a quick Terra. He does have 2 Feral Manticores up in the sky. This is not the most competitive unit in my opinion, but of course it's a very cheap source of fear and terror. It can definitely harass backlines, and they are backed here by 3 units of Cold One Knights in the woods, so my opponent definitely having some decent sort of cavalry presence, the potential to swing around my flank as I do start pushing forward to get those artillery shots, and then 2 Dark Riders with repeater crossbows. These guys can sort of pressure artillery and melee if needed, and otherwise they can poke away at, say, Black Orcs. They're very good at shutting down Black Orc play, which is probably the main threat, really, to this sort of composition, or definitely probably the main threat my opponent assumed for this composition. Regardless, you can see my small contingent of Skirmish Cav trying to push forward here, and my opponent promptly decides to counter with the Manticores. Now, this is, I think, a bit of a mistake. Manticores are not very good against Skirmish Cav in general, and they're actually one of the slowest flyers in the game. I think the only slower flyers are Harpies and Star Dragons. These guys have 85 speed. That's really not exactly stellar. And that does mean that here against Death Reapers with poison, they're not going to be able to catch them. Against Mogrov's Mangy Marauders with 92 speed, they're never going to catch them. It doesn't even matter that they've got the ability to move through the air, that they basically ignore terrain. These guys are still going to be too fast on the ground. So I promptly do start skirmishing away. Obviously knowing that these guys rampage, figuring that if I can potentially bait my opponent into a bad position, I can then force his Manticores to rampage, pull them down to the ground, and shut them down. If I could get him into the pack of Savage Orc Big Guns, that would be excellent, because the Manticores have very low melee stats, they've got very low armor, which is makes them a perfect target for Savage Orc Big Guns, especially with their fairly low HP as well. As you can see here, we are positioning some of the Savage Orc Big Guns and the Skulkers. My opponent here wanting to dive in, but last second peeling off. A very good move, a very good decision there, because that could have been absolutely disastrous. And you can see here, he's going to skirmish off with the Manticores. as I do sort of try to drop my lines here a little bit with the Savage Rogue Big Guns. Not really entirely sure where my opponent is, and I think both of us here at this point were fixated on this little skirmish over here, is why I have not pivoted my line around this way, which is what would have been the smart decision at this stage of the game. Regardless, you can see the Manticore here getting a little bit greedy. I sick the 2 skirmishers on this Manticore. It can't actually escape them. Once again, it's very slow like we discussed before. And over here my opponent does dive in with the Manticore, thinking he's going to get an easy little route on the Doomdiver Catapult crew. I simply pull the crew off and throw the Skulkers into the fray. Skulkers, they're going to absolutely slaughter the Manticore. You can see it rampages here. They're doing so much damage with their prison shanks. Of course, they do have the benefit of that opportunist murder. That gives them a huge buff to damage output. And as my opponent is trying to pull the Manticore away, I'm actually going to hit it with an effigy of the Git, which is going to make it stay in place and mean the nasty Skulkers can chip away at it. You can see just this horde of angry goblins shanking the poor Manticore, and it's really not going to be long for this world. On the other flank, in the meantime, we do rampage this Manticore, which is very bad for my opponent, and is going to force him to commit. Unfortunately, as we discussed before, I haven't pivoted my line, and this is definitely a problem for me. And you can see I've also pulled 2 of my Savage Rogue Big Guns offline. That means this unit of Big Guns doesn't get a charge off, and they get caught out. Absolutely disastrous for me. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, he's going to clump up very heavily here. Generally, if you've got infantry coming in from the front, sweep around with the cav. But definitely some brutal stuff here for myself. Immediately, though, the artillery fire is going to start countering, diving in to the fray, going after those Cold War Knights. And my opponent pushing into the Warlords boys here, but they will, of course, just hold their ground. They're immune to psychology, at least, so they will be able to hold at least for a little while. And Wa does go off to compensate. Over here, these greedy Dark Riders trying to get some shots in are going to get blocked off. And in the back, in the meantime, you can see the Manticore getting slaughtered by arrow fire. So the 2 Manticores have been shattered off. Of course, even if they hadn't been shattered off, Dark Elves have no source of healing, so they're basically out of the fight. Unfortunately for me, though, this front line is collapsing very quickly. I've definitely been in a bit of a pickle. Shockingly enough, these Savage Rooks over here held out in the pocket with some help from the Fits of Gork. Once again, very useful skill for that defensive buff. And here in the pits, with a get back here, we are able to counteract Doom and Darkness, which would have otherwise probably forced a rout on at least some of these units, potentially snowballed into a disaster. On the periphery, though, things not looking that hot. These Savage Rook Big Guns, like we discussed, we didn't have too many Savage Rook Big Guns in there. And these guys are going to rout, which is going to leave this fight down to the nasty Skulkers and the AP Cloonies, who have a missed opportunity here. Had I gotten a nice little cast of the loons, the spinning loons, I could have gotten some massive value, but unfortunately, too little too late. It is what it is. However, we do manage to stall out all this infantry here with the Savage Rogue Big Guns. Once again, like I said before, the casting. Oh, and you can see the nasty loons actually do get quite a bit of damage there. Definitely more than I thought they did. 63 kills for the AP Loons at the moment. But definitely Brain Bursting could have been incredibly useful here against these squishy Dark Elf infantry. However, at this point you can see that basically the game is coming down to the Orcs' favor. We do have our archery line shooting down the Dark Riders with the repeater crossbows. We do still have a good chunk of ammo on the Doomdivers, who are chipping away at this blob of infantry. And here in the pits, it's basically just down to Morathi slaying out against the Savage Rogues. And of course, Savage Rogues will tear through Morathi pretty effectively. She's only got 40 melee defense. These guys actually have pretty high melee attack, especially with Fists of Gork, and they're going to tear her to shreds. I do hit her with an effigy to get here just to keep her in place, but at this point, it's simply a matter of time before the collapse. So a quick little rehash of what went down. Obviously, my opponent's build wasn't exactly what I was built to counter here. I was looking mostly at a more elite build. These are something you see fairly often with Harganeth Executioners, Sister Slaughter, that sort of stuff. Oftentimes, you'll see a mix of both. And my opponent didn't do that. He didn't go with any Doomfire Warlocks. Perhaps he doesn't have the DLC, I don't know. But it's always something you want to anticipate with Dark Elves. Going over the build real quick, I do think it's pretty competitive. The Doomdivers definitely got a good chunk of damage in. The Savage Rook Big Guns just dumpstered some of these troops, and the Skirmish Cav was very powerful against Manticores. Personally, I'm not a big fan of Manticores in just about any matchup. They cost 900 apiece, and this is, I think, honestly my opponent's biggest mistake with this comp. Overall, he definitely has some good solutions to armored units. He's got some good fixes against just normal squishy Greenskins. He's got some good holding power here. But Manticores, I do understand what he was going for with the Terror Bomb with Morathi. But keep in mind that each Manticore is 900 gold. Together they're 1800. You could get a Hydra for that. A Hydra will do you give you far more value against Greenskins than the Manticore ever will. Even a Charybdis would probably get you more value. The simple reality is that the Manticore is easily kited off, as you saw there, by the Skirmishers. If it rampages, you're screwed. You're going to lose it. And honestly, if you're just trying to shut down backlines, you might as well bring Harpies. Also, keep in mind that if you think you need to get a rear charge with the terror causing unit to get the most value out of it, keep in mind that doesn't really matter. Terror procs completely separately from other debuffs. It's rear charge penalty is its own thing. The fact that a terror causing unit is causing the rear charge is irrelevant. You can rear charge an enemy faction with zombies, and the terror on your Karen rates fighting them from the front will still be the same terror, and as it would be if the Karen rates were the ones doing the rear charge. So do keep that in mind. You don't need to have a terror causing unit be the one doing the rear charging. All you need is to have some sort of terror on the front line. And I think my opponent definitely a bit of a mistake here with Feral Manticores. I definitely played a little too aggressively early on with him as well, and I think that cost him, since my skirmishers and my skulkers were able to pin down and slaughter the Feral Manticores down on the ground. But definitely, if I had a bit of a recommendation on how to utilize Manticores, or how to rather not utilize Manticores, it's definitely, if you're just bringing them for terror bomb, bring one and don't bother with more. If you're using them for anything else, just honestly don't bring them. They're just not that good. You'll get better value out of harpies for rear charges, for just backline disruption, and you'll get better value out of hydras for general sort of terror bomb frontline support if you're trying to get more. Regardless, yeah, as I said, I was pretty satisfied with this build. One other thing I do want to point out is, like I said before, Savage Orc Big Guns are really strong. Now, it might seem like Black Orcs are the way to go, but Black Orcs actually don't do that well against Sisters of Slaughter. I do want to quickly touch on this, and we will hop here into custom battles just to quickly show something. I did actually have the units ready here. Comparing the Sisters of Slaughter, you can see they've got 60 melee defense. This is actually where Savage Orc Big Guns really come into play with their ability to crump Sisters of Slaughter. On a baseline comparison, compared to Black Orcs, they do a lot less damage. They've got less melee attack, or sorry, barely more melee attack. However, with Frenzy kicked in, they've actually got an extra 12 melee attack more than the Black Orcs. And what does this mean in practice? And they've also got much closer damage stats to the Black Orcs, thanks to the fact that they do have the benefit from Frenzy and the better charge bonus. So what does this mean in practical terms? Savage Orc Big Guns with 48 melee attack against the Sisters of Slaughter, 60 melee defense. I do believe the baseline chance to hit is 35%. I have seen other values at some places, but regardless, going off the 35% mechanic, you're looking at a 23% chance to hit Sisters of Slaughter with your Savage Orc Big Guns. Black Orcs with only 36 melee attack are looking at the fact that they can only hit the Sisters of Slaughter, who have, as we just discussed, 60 melee attack, 60 melee defense. The Black Orcs can only hit them 11% of the time. That means the Black Orcs are hitting them almost the minimum chance to hit. The minimum chance to hit is 10%, as far as I am aware. And that means they're hitting less than half the time that Savage Orc Big Guns are. And this is just in protracted, drawn-out melee. On the charge, of course, the Savage Orc Big Guns are hitting even more often. They're obviously cheaper than Black Orcs, and they still do very well against all the cheaper, squishier Dark Elf troops. So this is something very much worth keeping in mind, I think, when you bring your front line as the Greenskins. You can do a mix and match Black Orcs and Savage Orc Big Guns. You can commit entirely to one and then bring something else to deal with, say, armor. That part's really up to you guys, but do keep in mind the Savage Orc Big Guns are a very solid counter to Sisters of Slaughter, and they become even more so with the backing of spells. Regardless, good game to my opponent. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. As before, I do apologize for the lack of audio. I did simply recast it. I'm hoping this helps, and hoping it's not a problem. Not really sure what the issue was, but regardless, we'll try again here. And as I said, I do apologize to those of you who did see the first version of the video, and hopefully this one's working out. So, as usual, guys, if you have any comments, any criticism, be sure to let me know. Definitely shout out to Raff for letting me know that there was no audio in this one. I'm not entirely sure why, but I do very much appreciate you calling me out on it, because thanks to that, hopefully not too many of you have to watch that. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. I do appreciate all for your time, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.